Hi, I'm Old Sneelock. Welcome to another episode of Old Sneelock's Workshop. I was having a discussion about quality control and quality measures and uh, interesting things that can happen. There's always differences when money enters the picture, and especially in manufacturing. Also, cultures can change what is considered acceptable. I worked for a company that began about World War II. And by the time I started working there, they were into making heavy equipment steering columns for over the road semis, farm tractors, earth moving equipment, military vehicles, and a small line of automotive columns for small cars. A Japanese company had bought the company and moved part of the operation to Kentucky out of range of the UAW. The small vehicle steering column used a piece of equipment to build universal joints for the column. It was called an oka. The machine itself was mostly capable. I could set it to stake the bearings fairly reliably depending on the condition of the stampings. That was the problem. We didn't have the machine to stamp the components. The Japanese shipped them to the US and controlled the frequency of the orders. The parts we received were run in random order, dumped into boxes, and sent by the pallet full. They were only about an inch long and a half inch in diameter. I think they either had two machines running or reworked the stamping dies that cut the holes the bearings were staked into. While the parts were in spec, they were while the parts were in while the parts were in spec, they were a bit difficult to get lined up in the machine. Uh, the staking process required a bearing to be shoved into a certain size hole in a certain position. And because the bearings, because the stampings were made on either a couple of machines or they had made changes to the die from time to time as it was running to try and keep it in spec, the part orientation of the hole where the bearing went into varied back and forth. As long as it stayed fairly close to center, you were okay. You could still stamp them. You could still stake the bearings in if it was high or even if it was low. But you couldn't maintain the machine at a certain setting because the parts varied too widely. Just the spec on the parts varied too widely. So I was stuck in a bad position. We were making these steering columns for the company down in Kentucky, and we couldn't get the parts. We couldn't get the dies to make the parts. And the Japanese company didn't want to be dealing with it. We had 10 crates of these U-joint subassemblies, the little horseshoe-shaped piece that the bearings got staked into. And that was like 10,000 of these U-joints. Well, the Japanese company said, we're not shipping you any more U-joint parts until you use up what you've had. Well, that meant the practice that had been going on for a number of years was to take any bad boxes and just set them aside. Well, they had, like I said, they had 10,000 parts sitting on a pallet, and they had to make steering columns out of them. So I said, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to adjust for mid-range, and we're just going to stamp as many as we can. And if you run into a long run that doesn't work, then we'll go through and readjust. So we went through 10,000 U-joints. About half of them were good. We ruined a whole lot of them. We busted stamping dies. We busted staking punches. We busted everything on that machine. But we ran through all the 10,000. And then they sent us another pallet, which evidently they had taken the good ones and put them on the first pallet, because the second pallet was even worse. I left the company. They were still using those bad U-joints. So why would they continue to do that? Well, because they insisted that the U-joint parts were good. The Japanese do not make mistakes. Okay, everybody has their little myth that they live by. That was theirs.